Welcome to the Story Lab. I hope you enjoy this story. Let's begin. I watched Lucinda from the doorway of our bedroom as she applied her makeup, the scent of her expensive perfume wafting through the air. My wife of 10 years, once the object of my deepest affections, now stirred only suspicion in my heart. Another book club meeting? I asked, keeping my tone neutral. Lucinda's hand paused for a moment before she continued applying her lipstick. Yes, darling. You know how passionate I am about literature. I suppressed a scoff. Passionate about literature? Lucinda hadn't picked up a book voluntarily since college. Her sudden interest in reading had coincided with these frequent evening outings, and I was no fool. Of course, I replied smoothly. What's on the agenda tonight? Dostoevsky? Austen? She laughed, a tinkling sound that once charmed me but now grated on my nerves. Oh, Douglas. You know I prefer more contemporary authors. We're discussing that new thriller everyone's been raving about. I nodded, feigning interest while my mind raced. As she turned to grab her purse, my eyes caught a flash of purple on her wrist, partially hidden by an ornate bracelet. A bruise? New jewelry? I inquired casually. Lucinda's smile faltered for a split second. This old thing? I've had it for ages. You bought it for me, remember? I hadn't, but I played along. Ah, yes. It suits you. As she busied herself with last-minute preparations, I discreetly slipped the GPS tracker into her purse. It was a necessary precaution, one I'd hoped I'd never have to take. But the mounting evidence of her deception left me no choice. Once Lucinda had left, I retreated to my study, pulling out the recent credit card statements I'd been reviewing. The charges from Cartier and the Ritz-Carlton stood out like beacons of betrayal. I hadn't authorized these purchases, nor had Lucinda mentioned them. I was about to call Melissa Carter, my trusted private investigator, when the doorbell rang. Opening the front door, I found Clinton Ramsey, my oldest friend and most trusted confidant, standing there with a concerned expression. Douglas, he greeted me, his brow furrowed. I was in the neighborhood and thought I'd drop by. Is everything all right? I ushered him inside, grateful for his presence. Clinton, your timing is impeccable. I could use your advice. We settled in my study, and I poured us each a glass of scotch. Clinton listened intently as I laid out my suspicions and the evidence I'd gathered. A GPS tracker? Clinton raised an eyebrow. That's a serious step, Douglas. I took a sip of my drink, savoring the burn. Something is wrong, Clinton. The lies, the unexplained expenses, these mysterious book club meetings. I need to know the truth. Clinton nodded slowly. And if your suspicions are confirmed, what then? Then I'll do what's necessary, I replied, my voice cold and firm. I won't be made a fool of, Clinton. If Lucinda has betrayed me, she'll learn that actions have consequences. My friend studied me for a moment, then nodded. I understand. You know I'm here for you, whatever you need. Have you considered the legal implications if this goes south? I smiled. That's why I'm glad you're here. Your legal expertise might prove invaluable in the coming days. As we discussed potential scenarios and strategies, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Melissa Carter, GPS active. Subject on the move. Not heading towards the usual meeting spot. I showed the message to Clinton, my suspicions solidifying into a hard knot of anger in my chest. It seems we're about to uncover the truth, I said, standing up. Care to join me on a little expedition, old friend? Clinton rose, determination etched on his face. Lead the way, Douglas. Whatever we find, we'll face it together. As we left the house, I felt a cold resolve settling over me. Lucinda had made her choice, and now it was time for me to make mine. Whatever lay ahead, I was prepared to face it head-on, with unwavering determination and the support of those who truly had my back. The night air was crisp as Clinton and I got into my car. I pulled up the GPS tracking app on my phone, watching the blinking dot that represented Lucinda's location. She was indeed heading away from her usual haunts, towards the outskirts of town. Any idea where she might be going? Clinton asked, peering at the screen. I shook my head. No, but we're about to find out. We followed the signal, tension building with each mile. The city lights faded behind us as we entered a more secluded, affluent area. Massive estates loomed behind wrought iron gates and manicured hedges. Finally, Lucinda's signal stopped moving. We parked a discreet distance away from a sprawling mansion, its windows ablaze with light. "I know this place," Clinton murmured. "It belongs to Roderick Callahan." The name sent a jolt through me. Roderick Callahan, CEO of a rival pharmaceutical company and notorious playboy. What business could Lucinda possibly have with him? As we watched, a familiar car pulled up to the mansion. My colleague, Dr. Angela Olson, stepped out and hurried inside. "Curiouser and curiouser," I muttered. "Clinton, I need you to contact Melissa. Have her dig up everything she can on Roderick Callahan and his connection to my wife and Dr. Olson." Clinton nodded, already dialing. While he spoke quietly to Melissa, I kept my eyes trained on the mansion, my mind racing with possibilities, each more infuriating than the last. When Clinton finished his call, he turned to me with a grim expression. "Douglas, there's something you need to know." Melissa did some digging, and it turns out Roderick is currently embroiled in a lawsuit. It's about a patent, your patent. The pieces started falling into place, painting a picture of betrayal that made my blood boil. "So that's her game," I said, my voice dangerously calm. "She's not just cheating on me. She's selling me out to my competitors." Clinton placed a hand on my shoulder. "Douglas, we need to tread carefully here. We don't have all the facts yet." I shrugged off his hand, my eyes never leaving the mansion. "Oh, we'll get the facts, Clinton, and then we'll plan our next move." As we sat there in the growing darkness, I felt a change coming over me. The last vestiges of the trusting, loving husband I had been were burning away, replaced by a colder, harder man. Lucinda had no idea the storm she had just unleashed. "We need to get closer," I said, opening my car door. "I need to see this with my own eyes." Clinton hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "All right, but let's be smart about this. We can't risk being seen." We made our way towards the mansion, sticking to the shadows. As we approached, I spotted a gap in the security system a skilled investigator like Melissa would exploit. With Clinton keeping watch, I managed to bypass the perimeter alarms and gain access to the property. Creeping along the side of the house, we found a partially open window. Voices drifted out, and my heart clenched as I recognized Lucinda's laugh. But it was the next voice that truly shocked me. "Come on, sis, lighten up. Douglas doesn't suspect a thing." I froze, disbelief washing over me. That voice belonged to my brother, Abraham. The struggling artist I'd been supporting for years was here, in league with my wife and my rival. Clinton's eyes widened in recognition, and he placed a steadying hand on my arm. We listened intently as the betrayal unfolded before us. "I still think we're moving too fast," Lucinda said, her voice carrying a note of worry. "What if Douglas catches on?" "Relax," Roderick's smooth voice replied. "By the time he realizes what's happening, it'll be too late. We'll have control of his research, his patents, everything. You and Abraham will be set for life, and I'll finally crush that self-righteous bastard." "And what about me?" Angela's voice chimed in. "Don't forget, I'm taking a huge risk here." "Your role is crucial, Angela," Roderick assured her. "Keep feeding us information from inside Douglas's lab. Once we discredit him professionally, you'll be in line to take over his position. Everyone wins." I'd heard enough. With a slight nod to Clinton, we retreated from the window and made our way back to the car. Once inside, I gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. "Douglas," Clinton began cautiously, "I know you're angry, but we need to think this through carefully." I turned to him, and something in my expression made him fall silent. "Oh, I'm thinking, Clinton. I'm thinking about how I'm going to destroy every last one of them." As we drove back into the city, my mind was already formulating a plan. Lucinda, Abraham, Roderick, Angela, they had no idea the enemy they just created. They wanted to play games? Fine, but they were about to learn that I played for keeps. "First thing tomorrow," I told Clinton, my voice cold and determined, "we're going to start putting things in motion. I want Melissa to gather every scrap of dirt she can find on all of them. And I need you to prepare the most ruthless divorce strategy you've ever conceived." Clinton's expression grim but resolute. You've got it, Douglas. We'll make them regret the day they ever thought of crossing you. As the city lights came into view, I felt a sense of calm settle over me. The pain of betrayal was still there, but it was being rapidly overshadowed by a burning desire for revenge. Lucinda and her co-conspirators thought they were so clever, but they had no idea what was coming. Let them enjoy their little victory for now. Soon, very soon, they would learn the true meaning of consequences. The next morning, I woke early, my mind already racing with plans and strategies. I'd barely slept, the voices of my betrayers echoing in my head throughout the night. But exhaustion was a small price to pay for the clarity their words had brought me. I was in my study, reviewing the notes I'd made, when my phone buzzed. It was Melissa. Dr. Swanson. Her crisp voice came through the speaker. I've been following the GPS signal as requested. Your wife left the mansion around 2 a.m. and returned home. She's currently at your residence. Excellent work, Melissa, I replied. What else have you uncovered about our friend Roderick Callahan? There was a slight pause before Melissa continued, her tone professional but tinged with disgust. Mr. Callahan has quite the reputation, sir. Multiple allegations of manipulating women for personal and professional gain, though nothing that stuck legally. His business practices are equally shady. Numerous lawsuits settled out of court. Whispers of industrial espionage. I nodded, unsurprised. And his connection to my patent? That's where it gets interesting, Melissa said, her voice lowering slightly. I've uncovered communications between Callahan's legal team and a mole in your research department. They're planning to challenge the patent, claiming prior art. If successful, it could invalidate your claim and open the door for Callahan's company to swoop in. The pieces were falling into place, forming a picture of betrayal more complex than I'd initially imagined. Thank you, Melissa. Keep digging. I want every skeleton in their closets laid bare. After ending the call, I sat back in my chair, my mind working furiously. The patent in question was the culmination of years of research, a breakthrough that could revolutionize neurosurgery. And now, Lucinda and her conspirators were trying to steal it from under my nose. I was pulled from my thoughts by the sound of the front door opening. Lucinda's voice drifted up the stairs, falsely cheerful. Douglas? Are you home, darling? Taking a deep breath, I steeled myself for the performance ahead. I couldn't let on that I knew anything not yet. In the study, I called back, keeping my voice neutral. Lucinda appeared in the doorway, looking immaculate as always. But now, I could see the cracks in her facade, the slight tension around her eyes, the way her smile didn't quite reach them. How was your book club? I asked, watching her carefully. She waved a hand dismissively. Oh, you know how these things can drag on. I'm exhausted. I think I'll take a nap before dinner. I nodded, playing the role of the oblivious husband. Of course, dear. Rest well. As she turned to leave, I called out, Oh, Lucinda, I was thinking we might have dinner with Abraham this weekend. It's been a while since we've seen him. For a split second, panic flashed in her eyes before she composed herself. That's a lovely idea, darling. I'll give him a call later. Once she was gone, I allowed myself a smile. The game was on, and they had no idea they were already losing. The rest of the day passed in a flurry of activity. Clinton arrived mid-morning, armed with preliminary divorce papers and a strategy that would make a shark blush. We need to move fast, he advised, spreading documents across my desk. The longer we wait, the more time they have to cover their tracks. I nodded, scanning the papers. What's our first move? Clinton's eyes gleamed with a predatory light. We freeze the assets. All of them. Joint accounts, investments, everything. We'll cite suspicion of financial misconduct. It won't hold forever, but it'll buy us time and cut off their resources. Do it, I said without hesitation. And what about Abraham? He's been living off my donations to his art career for years. A slow smile spread across Clinton's face. I think it's time for baby brother to learn about financial independence, don't you? We'll cut him off completely. No more stipends, no more gallery showings that you secretly fund. Let's see how he fares without your support. As Clinton made calls and set things in motion, I turned my attention to the professional front. If Angela thought she could simply step into my shoes once I was discredited, she had another thing coming. I spent the afternoon in careful conversations with hospital administration and key members of the research team, planting seeds of doubt about Angela's recent work and hinting at concerns about her professional ethics. It was subtle, but in the cutthroat world of medical research, even a whisper of impropriety could be career-ending. As evening fell, I received another call from Melissa. "Dr. Swanson, I've uncovered something you need to see. Can you meet me?" 20 minutes later, I was sitting in a nondescript car in a parking garage, looking at surveillance photos that made my blood boil. There was Lucinda, entering a high-end jewelry store. And there, unmistakably, was my brother Abraham, his arm around her waist as they exited the Ritz-Carlton. The hotel records show they've been meeting there regularly for months, Melissa informed me, her voice professionally detached. "Always booked under Abraham's name, but paid for with a card linked to your accounts." I stared at the photos, feeling the last shreds of familial affection withering away. "Thank you, Melissa. You've been invaluable." As I drove home, my resolve hardened further. They thought they could play me for a fool, use my money and my trust against me. But they were about to learn a harsh lesson. No one betrays Douglas Swanson and walks away unscathed. Back at the house, I found Lucinda in the kitchen, preparing dinner as if it were any other night. The normalcy of the scene struck me as absurd, knowing what I now knew. "Busy day?" she asked, her tone light. I allowed myself a small, cold smile. "Oh, very productive. In fact, I think things are about to change quite dramatically around here." Lucinda's hand paused as she was chopping vegetables. "Oh, how so?" I approached her, watching as she tensed almost imperceptibly. "Let's just say I've had some enlightening conversations today. About business, about family." I leaned in close, my voice dropping to a whisper. "About loyalty." The knife clattered to the cutting board as Lucinda turned to face me, her eyes wide. "Douglas, what are you talking about?" I stepped back, my face a mask of calm. "Nothing for you to worry about, dear. After all, we have no secrets from each other, do we?" Without waiting for her response, I turned and walked out of the kitchen, leaving her standing there, the perfect picture of guilty confusion. As I climbed the stairs to my study, I allowed myself a moment of satisfaction. The pieces were falling into place, and soon, those who had betrayed me would face the consequences of their actions. I settled into my chair, pulling up the surveillance footage Melissa had sent me. Watching Lucinda and Abraham together, their intimacy on display, ignited a cold fury within me. But I channeled that anger into determination, focusing on the next steps of my plan. A soft knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. "Come in," I called, knowing it would be Lucinda. She entered hesitantly, her earlier confidence shaken. "Douglas, I think we need to talk." I leaned back in my chair, regarding her coolly. "By all means, Lucinda. What's on your mind?" She fidgeted with her bracelet, the same one that had hidden the bruise I'd noticed earlier. "You seemed upset earlier. Is everything all right?" "Upset?" I echoed, my voice dangerously calm. "No, Lucinda, I'm not upset. I'm simply enlightened." Her eyes widened slightly. "What do you mean?" I stood slowly, walking around the desk to face her directly. "Tell me, how's Abraham these days? Enjoying his stay at the Ritz-Carlton?" The color drained from Lucinda's face. I don't know what you're talking about." "No?" I pulled out my phone, showing her the surveillance photos. "Perhaps these will refresh your memory." Lucinda stumbled back, her composure crumbling. "Douglas, I can explain." I held up a hand, cutting her off. "Save your explanations, Lucinda. I'm not interested in your lies anymore." I moved closer, my voice low and controlled. "Did you really think you could betray me so thoroughly and get away with it?" Tears welled in her eyes, but I felt no sympathy. "It's not what you think," she pleaded. "It's exactly what I think," I replied coldly. "You, Abraham Roderick Callahan, you've all conspired against me. But let me make one thing clear. This is a game you cannot win." Lucinda's tears fell freely now. "What are you going to do?" I smiled, a cold, humorless expression. "You'll find out soon enough. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have work to do." As Lucinda fled the study, I turned back to my desk, my resolve stronger than ever. The first moves had been made, and now it was time to tighten the noose. The next day, I put the final touches on my plan. With Melissa's expert help, I had arranged to infiltrate Roderick Callahan's mansion during their next meeting. As night fell, I found myself once again parked outside the sprawling estate, this time alone. Melissa's voice crackled through my earpiece. "Security systems are down, Dr. Swanson. You have a 10-minute window." I moved swiftly across the grounds, my heart pounding not with fear, but with anticipation. As I approached the house, voices drifted from an open window. I positioned myself carefully, ensuring I could hear every word. "We need to move faster," Roderick's voice came through clearly. "Douglas is getting suspicious." "Relax," Abraham's voice replied, dripping with arrogance. "My dear brother is too trusting for his own good. He has no idea what's coming." Their words confirmed my worst suspicions, but it was Lucinda's voice that truly chilled my blood. "Once we have control of his research and discredit him professionally, we'll be set for life," she said, her tone gleeful. "And the best part? He'll never see it coming." I'd heard enough. With silent fury, I made my way back to my car, my mind racing. They had revealed their hand, and now it was time to play mine. Back at home, I immediately called Clinton. "It's worse than we thought," I told him, recounting what I'd overheard. Clinton's voice was steady. "This changes things, Douglas. We need to act fast." "Agreed," I replied. "Set everything in motion. Freeze the accounts, file the divorce papers, all of it." "And Clinton?" "No mercy." "Understood," he said. "They won't know what hit them." As I ended the call, a text from Melissa came through. "Dr. Olson spotted entering Callahan's mansion 20 minutes after you left. Surveillance ongoing." So, Angela was in deeper than I'd realized. Very well. She'd fall with the rest of them. I spent the night in my study, meticulously planning each move. By dawn, I had a clear strategy. I would not just defend myself. I would systematically dismantle everything they held dear. As the first light of day broke, I heard Lucinda stirring in our bedroom. For a moment, I allowed myself to remember the woman I thought I had married. But that woman was a lie, and the time for sentimentality was long past. I walked into the bedroom, finding Lucinda bleary-eyed and confused. "Douglas? You're up early." "Indeed," I replied coolly. "I have a busy day ahead. But before I go, there's something you should know." I tossed a manila envelope onto the bed. "You've been served, Lucinda. I'm divorcing you." Her eyes widened in shock. "What? Douglas, you can't be serious." "Oh, I'm very serious," I said, my voice devoid of emotion. "You might want to call Abraham. I imagine he'll be receiving some interesting news of his own very soon." As I turned to leave, Lucinda grabbed my arm. "Please, Douglas, let me explain." I shook off her grip, fixing her with a cold stare. "Save your explanations for the court, Lucinda. You'll need them." Leaving her in stunned silence, I walked out of the house, ready to set the rest of my plan in motion. The game had changed, and now it was my turn to play. The following weeks were a whirlwind of activity. I threw myself into my work at the hospital, maintaining a facade of normalcy while setting my plans in motion behind the scenes. One afternoon, as I was reviewing patient files in my office, there was a knock at the door. "Come in," I called, not looking up from my work. "Dr. Swanson?" It was Whitney Chen, the cybersecurity expert I had contacted. "I have the information you requested." I gestured for her to sit. "What have you found?" Whitney pulled out her laptop, her fingers flying over the keys. "It's quite extensive, Dr. Swanson. Your wife and brother have been very busy." She turned the screen towards me, showing a complex web of financial transactions and communications. "They've been siphoning funds from your accounts for months, using a series of shell companies to hide the trail. But that's not all." I leaned forward, my interest piqued. "Go on." "There's evidence of collusion with Roderick Callahan," Whitney continued. "Emails, text messages, even recorded phone calls. They've been feeding him information about your research, Dr. Swanson. Confidential data, experimental results, everything." I felt a surge of cold anger, but kept my voice steady. "And Dr. Olson's involvement?" Whitney nodded. She's been their inside source at the hospital, providing access to secure servers, altering data. It's all here. I sat back, processing this information. Excellent work, Whitney. I need all of this documented and secured. Can you do that? Already done, Dr. Swanson, she replied, handing me a small hard drive. Everything's here, encrypted and backed up on secure servers. They can't touch it. I pocketed the drive, feeling a sense of satisfaction. Thank you, Whitney. Your discretion in this matter is appreciated. After Whitney left, I called Clinton. It's time, I told him. Initiate the legal proceedings. And make sure the media gets wind of Roderick's unethical practices. Anonymously, of course. Consider it done, Clinton replied. And Douglas? Brace yourself. This is going to get ugly. I smiled coldly. I'm counting on it. Over the next few days, I watched as my plan unfolded. The media frenzy around Roderick Callahan's business practices grew, with anonymous tips, courtesy of Melissa, fueling the fire. The SEC announced an investigation, and Roderick's company's stock began to plummet. At home, Lucinda was growing increasingly desperate. I had moved into the guest room, ignoring her pleas for conversation. One evening, as I was leaving for the hospital, she confronted me in the foyer. Douglas, please, she begged, her eyes red-rimmed. We need to talk about this. You're destroying everything. I regarded her coldly. No, Lucinda. You destroyed everything the moment you decided to betray me. I'm simply ensuring you face the consequences of your actions. But what about us? She cried. Don't you remember how happy we were? For a moment, I allowed myself to remember the good times we had shared. But then the image of her with Abraham flashed through my mind. Us died the moment you chose my brother over me, I replied, my voice like ice. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have patients who need my attention. As I drove to the hospital, I received a call from Melissa. Dr. Swanson, I have an update on your brother. Go ahead, I said, switching to hands-free. The art community is buzzing with rumors about Abraham's work, Melissa reported. Someone anonymously tipped off several galleries about his, let's call it, creative inspiration from other artists. I smiled. Excellent. Keep me updated on any developments. At the hospital, I noticed Dr. Olson watching me nervously. I approached her, my face a mask of professional concern. Angela, I greeted her. Is everything all right? You seem distracted lately. She flinched slightly. Oh, I'm fine, Douglas. Just a lot on my mind. I nodded sympathetically. I understand. These are trying times for all of us. If you need to talk, my door is always open. As I walked away, I could feel her eyes boring into my back. Let her worry, I thought. Her time would come soon enough. That night, as I sat in my study reviewing the latest updates from Clinton and Melissa, I allowed myself a moment of reflection. The path I had chosen was not an easy one, but it was necessary. Those who had betrayed me would learn that their actions had consequences, and I would be the one to deliver them. My phone buzzed with a text from Clinton. Everything's in place. Ready to proceed on your command. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was to come. Then, with a sense of determination, I typed out my response, do it. The storm I had been silently brewing was about to break, and when it did, it would sweep away everything in its path. Let them try to weather it, I thought. They would soon learn that betraying Douglas Swanson was the biggest mistake of their lives. Weeks passed, and the effects of my carefully orchestrated plan began to manifest. I maintained my routine at the hospital, a picture of professional composure, while chaos erupted around those who had betrayed me. One morning, as I was preparing for surgery, my phone buzzed with a series of rapid-fire notifications. I stepped into my office to check them, a sense of anticipation building. The first was a news alert. Pharmaceutical CEO Roderick Callahan under SEC investigation. Stock plummets. I allowed myself a small, cold smile before opening the next message. It was from Clinton. Divorce proceedings initiated. Lucinda's assets frozen. She's been trying to reach me all morning. The final notification was from Melissa. Abraham Swanson accused of plagiarism by multiple artists. Major exhibition canceled. I pocketed my phone, feeling a surge of satisfaction. The dominoes were falling, just as I had planned. But this was only the beginning. As I scrubbed in for surgery, Dr. Olson approached me, her face pale and drawn. "Douglas," she said hesitantly, "can we talk later? It's important." I regarded her coolly. "Of course, Angela." My office, after the surgery. Throughout the procedure, I could feel her nervous energy, her hands slightly less steady than usual. But I remained focused, my mind clear and my movements precise. I wouldn't allow their betrayal to affect my patients. Hours later, I sat behind my desk, waiting for Angela. She entered timidly, a far cry from her usual confident demeanor. "Sit down, Angela," I said, gesturing to the chair across from me. "What's on your mind?" She took a shaky breath. "Douglas, I've made a terrible mistake. I need to confess something." I leaned back, my face impassive. "Go on." I've been helping Roderick Callahan," she blurted out, "providing him with information about your research. But I swear, I didn't know how far it would go. When I realized what was happening, I tried to back out. But what, Angela?" I asked, my voice dangerously calm. Tears welled in her eyes. "He threatened me. Said he'd ruin my career if I didn't continue. I was scared, Douglas. I didn't know what to do." I studied her for a long moment, watching her squirm under my gaze. "And now? Why come to me now?" "Because it's all falling apart," she whispered. "The SEC investigation, the rumors. I can't do this anymore. I'm willing to testify, to tell the truth about everything. Please, Douglas." "I'm so sorry." I stood slowly, walking around the desk to stand before her. "Your apology means nothing to me, Angela. But your testimony? That could be valuable." Hope flickered in her eyes. "Does that mean you'll help me?" I smiled coldly. "Oh, I'll help you, Angela. I'll help you face the consequences of your actions. You'll testify, all right, but you'll do it without any guarantees of protection. You made your choice when you betrayed me. Now you'll live with it." As Angela left my office, her shoulders slumped in defeat. I felt no pity. She had chosen her side, and now she would fall with the rest of them. That evening, I returned home to find Lucinda waiting for me, her eyes wild with desperation. "Douglas," she cried, "what have you done? The accounts are frozen, the credit cards canceled. How am I supposed to live?" I regarded her coldly. "Perhaps you should ask Abraham for help." "Oh, wait. He's rather preoccupied with his own problems, isn't he?" Lucinda's face crumpled. "Please, Douglas. I know I made a mistake, but isn't this going too far?" "Too far?" I repeated, my voice sharp. "You conspired with my brother and my rival to steal my research and ruin my career. You betrayed every vow we made. And you think this is too far?" I stepped closer, my voice lowering to a dangerous whisper. "Let me assure you, Lucinda, this is only the beginning. By the time I'm done, you'll wish you had never even thought of crossing me." As I turned to leave, Lucinda grabbed my arm. "Wait, I have information. About Roderick, about the whole plan. If I tell you everything, will you call off the divorce?" For a moment, I was tempted to laugh at her desperation. Instead, I fixed her with an icy stare. "You had your chance for honesty, Lucinda. That ship has sailed. But by all means, share your information with my lawyers. It might make for an interesting footnote in the divorce proceedings." I shook off her grip and walked away, leaving her sobbing in the foyer. As I climbed the stairs to my study, I felt no remorse, no second thoughts. They had made their choices, and now they would face the storm they had created. My phone buzzed with a message from Clinton. "Abraham's trying to reach you." Sounds desperate. I smiled. Let him squirm, I thought. His time would come soon enough. As I settled into my chair, I pulled out the hard drive Whitney had given me. It was time to review the evidence once more, to ensure that every move I made from here on out would be calculated and devastating. The facade was crumbling, just as I had planned, and as it fell, it would reveal the true faces of those who had thought they could outsmart me. They were about to learn a harsh lesson. In this game, I always came out on top. As the days wore on, the pressure on my betrayers intensified. I watched from afar, a silent orchestrator of their downfall, as their carefully constructed world crumbled around them. One afternoon, as I was leaving the hospital, I received an urgent call from Clinton. Douglas, we've got a situation. Roderick Callahan is trying to frame you for corporate espionage. I felt a surge of cold anger but kept my voice steady. Explain. Clinton's voice was stern. He's fabricated documents suggesting you stole research from his company. He's threatening to go public with it. I see, I replied, my mind already working on a counter-strategy. Meet me at my office in an hour. Bring everything you have on this. As I drove back to the hospital, I called Whitney. I need you to trace the origin of some documents. They'll be fabricated, but I want to know exactly how and when they were created. On it, Dr. Swanson, Whitney replied efficiently. I'll have results for you within the hour. Back in my office, Clinton laid out the details of Roderick's scheme. It was clever, I had to admit, but ultimately flawed. He's desperate, I observed coldly. This reeks of a last-ditch effort. Clinton nodded. What's our move? Just then, Whitney's report came through. I scanned it quickly, a smile spreading across my face. Roderick made a mistake. These documents were created using software licensed to his company. Whitney's traced the exact time and computer they were made on. Clinton's eyes lit up with understanding. We can prove he fabricated them. Exactly, I replied. But we're not going to stop there. Clinton, I want you to prepare a countersuit for defamation and attempted fraud. Whitney, I need you to dig deeper into Roderick's systems. If he's willing to fabricate this, I'm betting there's more we can uncover. As they left to carry out their tasks, Dr. Olson knocked on my door. She looked haggard, the strain of recent events clearly taking its toll. Douglas, she began hesitantly, I've been thinking about what you said. I'm ready to testify. About everything. I studied her for a moment. Very well, Angela. My lawyer will be in touch to take your statement. But remember, this doesn't absolve you of your actions. She nodded, her eyes downcast. I understand. I want to make things right. It's far too late for that, I replied coldly. But your testimony will be useful. You're dismissed. As she left, I turned my attention back to Roderick's attempted frame-up. It was time to turn his desperate move against him. Over the next few days, I watched as my counter-strategy unfolded. Roderick's scheme backfired spectacularly. The evidence of his fabrication splashed across every major news outlet. The SEC investigation intensified, and his company's stock plummeted even further. One evening, as I was reviewing the latest updates from Clinton, my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize. Dr. Swanson speaking, I answered. Douglas, it's Roderick, came the desperate voice on the other end. We need to talk. Please, I can explain everything. I felt a surge of cold satisfaction. I'm afraid I have nothing to say to you, Roderick. Any communication can go through my lawyers. Wait, he cried. I'll do anything. Name your price. We can work something out. Goodbye, Roderick, I replied calmly, ending the call. As I set the phone down, I reflected on how far we'd come. Roderick, once so confident in his scheme, now reduced to begging. Lucinda and Abraham, cut off from their lavish lifestyle, facing the harsh reality of their choices. And Angela, her career in tatters, clinging to the hope that her testimony might save her. The ties that had bound us, all those false bonds of love, friendship, and professional courtesy had been severed. And in their place, I had woven a new web, one of justice and retribution. As I prepared for bed that night, I received one final message from Clinton. It's done. Roderick's facing multiple federal charges. Lucinda and Abraham's assets have been frozen pending investigation. We're set for the final phase. I smiled. The end was in sight, and victory was within my grasp. Let them all face the consequences of their actions. I had no room for mercy in my heart, only the cold satisfaction of justice served. The day had finally arrived. After weeks of carefully orchestrated moves, it was time for the final confrontation. I stood in my study, adjusting my tie as I prepared to face those who had betrayed me. A knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. Come in, I called. Clinton entered, his face set in determination. Are you ready for this, Douglas? I nodded, my resolve unwavering. More than ready. Let's end this. We drove to the agreed meeting place, a private conference room in Clinton's law firm. As we entered, I saw them all there: Lucinda, Abraham, and Angela. Roderick, facing federal charges, was conspicuously absent. The room fell silent as I walked in. I took my seat at the head of the table, Clinton at my right hand, and surveyed the faces before me. Lucinda, once radiant with confidence, now looked haggard and defeated. Abraham's artistic pretensions had crumbled, leaving him a shell of his former self. Angela sat apart from the others, her eyes downcast. "Well," I began, my voice cold and clear, "here we are. I trust you all understand why you've been called here today?" Lucinda was the first to speak, her voice trembling. "Douglas, please. Can't we talk about this? We can still fix things. Go back to how they were." I cut her off with a sharp laugh. "Go back? There's no going back, Lucinda. You made your choices. Now you face the consequences." Abraham leaned forward, his face a mask of desperation. "Brother, I know I've wronged you, but we're family. Surely that counts for something?" I fixed him with an icy stare. "Family? You lost the right to call me that when you betrayed me. You're nothing to me now, Abraham." Angela spoke up, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've given my testimony, Douglas. I've told them everything. What more do you want from me?" "Want?" I repeated, my tone dangerously calm. "I want justice, Angela. I want each of you to understand the full weight of your actions." I turned to Clinton, who nodded and began distributing documents. "Before you," I continued, "you'll find detailed accounts of your individual transgressions. Financial records, communication logs, witness statements, everything that proves your guilt beyond a shadow of a doubt." Lucinda's hands shook as she flipped through the pages. This is everything?" "Everything," I confirmed. "Your attempts to siphon my funds, your collusion with Roderick, your plans to discredit me professionally, it's all there." Abraham's face had gone pale. "What happens now?" I leaned back in my chair, studying each of them in turn. "Now, you face the music. Lucinda, our divorce will proceed. You'll receive nothing, not a penny of alimony, not a single asset. The prenup you so foolishly ignored will be enforced to its fullest extent." Lucinda let out a choked sob, but I continued without pause. "Abraham, your artistic career is over. The galleries have blacklisted you, and I've made sure every potential patron knows of your plagiarism and fraud. You'll be lucky to sell a sketch on a street corner." I turned to Angela, who flinched under my gaze. "As for you, Dr. Olson, your testimony has been noted, but it doesn't absolve you. The medical board has been informed of your ethical violations. Your license will be reviewed, and I wouldn't count on a favorable outcome." The room fell silent as the weight of my words sank in. Then, Lucinda made one last, desperate attempt. "Douglas," she pleaded, reaching across the table towards me, "I know we've hurt you, but this vendetta, it's destroying everything. Is this really what you want?" I met her gaze, my eyes cold and unyielding. "What I want, Lucinda, is irrelevant. This isn't about want. It's about justice. You all made your choices, thinking you could outsmart me, use me, betray me without consequence. You were wrong." I stood, buttoning my jacket as I prepared to leave. "This meeting is over. My lawyers will be in touch with each of you regarding the next steps. I suggest you find good legal representation. You're going to need it." As I turned to leave, Abraham called out, his voice broken, "Douglas, wait. Please. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." I paused at the door, looking back at the shattered remains of what I once called family and friends. "Your apologies mean nothing to me. Goodbye." With that, I walked out, Clinton at my side. As the door closed behind us, I heard the muffled sounds of Lucinda's sobs and Abraham's pleas. But I felt nothing, no regret, no sadness, only the cold satisfaction of justice served. "Well," Clinton said as we walked to the elevator, "that's done. How do you feel?" I considered the question for a moment. "I feel vindicated. They thought they could break me, Clinton. Instead, I broke them." Clinton nodded, a hint of admiration in his eyes. "You certainly did. What's next for you, Douglas?" As the elevator doors opened, I stepped in, a small smile playing on my lips. Now we rebuild. Stronger, better, without the dead weight of betrayal holding us back. The doors closed, and as we descended, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders. The confrontation was over, the betrayers dealt with. Now, it was time to rise from the ashes they had tried to bury me in. The day of the divorce hearing arrived, the culmination of months of legal maneuvering and preparation. I adjusted my tie as I entered the courthouse, Clinton at my side, his briefcase bulging with evidence of Lucinda's infidelity and financial misconduct. "Ready for this?" Clinton asked, his voice low. I nodded, my face a mask of calm determination. "More than ready. Let's finish this." As we entered the courtroom, I saw Lucinda sitting with her lawyer, a young, nervous-looking man who seemed out of his depth. Lucinda's eyes were red-rimmed, her once impeccable appearance now haggard and unkempt. The judge called the court to order, and the proceedings began. Lucinda's lawyer went first, attempting to paint her as a victim of a cold, neglectful husband. "Your Honor," he began, his voice slightly trembling, "my client was driven to her actions by years of emotional neglect." Dr. Swanson's single-minded focus on his career left Mrs. Swanson feeling isolated and unloved. I kept my face impassive as he continued, spinning a tale of a lonely wife seeking comfort and understanding. When he finished, the judge turned to Clinton. "Mr. Ramsey, your response?" Clinton stood, his presence commanding the room. "Your Honor, the defense's portrayal of Mrs. Swanson as a victim is not only false but insulting to actual victims of neglect. We have irrefutable evidence that Mrs. Swanson's actions were premeditated, motivated by greed and a callous disregard for her marital vows." He proceeded to lay out our case, methodically presenting evidence of Lucinda's affair, her financial misconduct, and her collusion with Roderick Callahan. As each piece of evidence was presented, I watched Lucinda's face crumple, her lawyer growing increasingly desperate. Furthermore, Clinton continued, "We have testimony from Dr. Angela Olson, confirming Mrs. Swanson's active participation in a plot to discredit Dr. Swanson professionally and seize control of his assets." The judge's eyebrows rose at this. "Is Dr. Olson present to testify?" "Yes, Your Honor," Clinton replied, gesturing to Angela, who sat nervously in the gallery. As Angela took the stand, I met her gaze briefly. She looked away quickly, shame evident in her posture. "Dr. Olson," the judge began, "please tell the court about your involvement in this matter." Angela's voice was shaky but clear as she recounted the plot, confirming every detail we had presented. As she spoke, Lucinda's lawyer frantically whispered to her, but she seemed beyond hearing, her eyes fixed on Angela with a mix of betrayal and despair. When Angela finished, the courtroom was silent. The judge looked from her to Lucinda, then to me, his expression grave. "Mrs. Swanson," he said finally, "do you have anything to add in your defense?" Lucinda stood, her legs shaking. "Your Honor, I made mistakes, terrible mistakes, but I loved Douglas once. I still do. Please, isn't there any way we can?" "That's enough, Mrs. Swanson," the judge cut her off. "This court is not here to mediate reconciliations. Based on the evidence presented, I'm prepared to make my ruling." He turned to me. "Dr. Swanson, your petition for divorce is granted. Given the overwhelming evidence of Mrs. Swanson's marital misconduct and financial impropriety, I'm enforcing the prenuptial agreement in its entirety. Mrs. Swanson will receive no alimony, and all jointly held assets will revert to Dr. Swanson's sole ownership." Lucinda let out a choked sob, collapsing into her chair. Her lawyer looked shell-shocked, clearly unprepared for such a decisive ruling. The judge continued, "Furthermore, I'm recommending a full investigation into Mrs. Swanson's financial activities. Mr. Ramsey, please ensure the relevant authorities receive all pertinent evidence." "Of course, Your Honor," Clinton replied smoothly. As the judge adjourned the court, I stood, buttoning my jacket. Lucinda rushed towards me, her eyes wild with desperation. "Douglas, please," she begged, reaching for my arm. "Don't do this. We can start over. I'll do anything." I stepped back, avoiding her touch. "It's done, Lucinda. You made your choices. Now live with them." With that, I turned and walked out of the courtroom, leaving behind the shattered remains of my marriage and the woman I once thought I'd spend my life with. Outside, Clinton clapped me on the shoulder. "Congratulations, Douglas. It's over." I nodded, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders. "Not quite. There's still Roderick's trial to deal with." Clinton smiled. "Don't worry. With the evidence we've gathered and Dr. Olson's testimony, he doesn't stand a chance." As we walked down the courthouse steps, I allowed myself a small smile. The courtroom battle was won, and justice had been served. But I knew this was just one victory in a larger war. There was still work to be done, a legacy to rebuild, and a future to secure. Years had passed since that fateful day in court. I stood on the balcony of my penthouse, overlooking the city I had helped shape. The skyline had changed, new buildings rising where old ones once stood, a fitting metaphor for my own life. A knock at the door interrupted my reverie. "Come in," I called, turning from the view. Clinton entered, a broad smile on his face. "Douglas, the guests are starting to arrive. Are you ready?" I nodded, adjusting my tie. "As ready as I'll ever be. Let's not keep them waiting." We descended to the main floor of the penthouse, where a gathering of friends, colleagues, and supporters had assembled. This wasn't just a social event. It was a celebration of triumph over adversity, of rising from the ashes stronger than before. As I mingled with the guests, accepting congratulations and well wishes, I caught sight of a young woman hovering nervously near the edge of the crowd. Her eyes darted around the room, taking in the opulent surroundings with a mix of awe and determination. Intrigued, I made my way over to her. "Good evening," I greeted her. "I don't believe we've met." She startled slightly, then straightened, meeting my gaze with surprising intensity. "Dr. Swanson, I'm Emily Chun. I'm an artist. I was hoping to speak with you about your foundation's mentorship program." I studied her for a moment, noting the passion in her eyes. It reminded me of a younger version of myself, hungry for knowledge and opportunity. But unlike my brother, there was a genuineness to her that couldn't be faked. "Tell me, Ms. Chun," I said, "what drives your art?" She launched into an explanation of her work, her theories on color and form, her desire to push boundaries and challenge perceptions. As she spoke, I found myself nodding, impressed by her articulation and vision. "You have talent," I told her when she finished. "And more importantly, you have drive. I'd be interested in seeing more of your work." Emily's eyes lit up with excitement. "Really? Thank you, Dr. Swanson. I'd be honored to show you my portfolio." "Come to my office next week," I said, handing her my card. "We'll discuss your work and the mentorship program in detail." As Emily moved away, buzzing with newfound hope, Clinton approached. "Making new friends, Douglas?" he asked, a knowing smile on his face. I nodded, watching Emily as she excitedly spoke with other guests. "Perhaps. She has potential, Clinton. Real potential. Not the manufactured kind my brother tried to pass off." Clinton's smile widened. "It's good to see you taking an interest again. Speaking of which, it's almost time for your speech." I made my way to the small podium set up in the corner of the room, tapping a glass to get everyone's attention. The chatter died down as all eyes turned to me. "Thank you all for coming tonight," I began, my voice strong and clear. "We're here to celebrate not just the success of our latest medical breakthrough, but the triumph of integrity over deceit, of perseverance over adversity." I paused, looking out over the faces of those who had stood by me through the darkest times. Years ago, I faced betrayal from those I trusted most. They sought to destroy everything I had built, to discredit me personally and professionally. But they underestimated me. A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. Many of them knew the story, had watched it unfold in the media. I stand before you today not as a victim, but as a victor. Our research has revolutionized neurosurgery, saving countless lives. Our foundation has supported dozens of promising young scientists and artists, ensuring that talent and integrity are rewarded. I raised my glass, and the crowd followed suit. "To the future," I said, "to rising above those who would drag us down, and to building a legacy that will outlast us all." As applause filled the room, I caught sight of Emily again. The look of admiration and determination in her eyes reminded me of why I had fought so hard. It wasn't just about revenge or justice. It was about creating a world where talent and hard work were valued above all else. The party continued late into the night. As the last guests were leaving, Clinton and his wife, Sarah, lingered. "Quite a night, Douglas," Sarah said, giving me a warm hug. "You should be proud." I nodded, feeling a sense of contentment I hadn't experienced in years. "I am, but there's still work to be done." Clinton chuckled, always looking to the next challenge. Some things never change. As they left, I returned to the balcony, looking out over the city once more. The lights twinkled like stars, a testament to human ambition and perseverance. My phone buzzed with a message. It was from my sister, Barbara. "Watched your speech online. So proud of you, big brother. You've come so far. Love you always." I smiled, feeling a warmth in my chest. Barbara had been my rock through everything, the one true family I had left. Her support had meant more than she could ever know. As I prepared for bed that night, I caught my reflection in the mirror. The man looking back at me was older, certainly, with streaks of gray at his temples. But his eyes were clear and determined, unburdened by the weight of betrayal that had once threatened to crush him. I thought back to Lucinda, Abraham, Roderick, and Angela. Last I'd heard, they were all struggling to rebuild their shattered lives. But I felt no pity, no regret. They had made their choices, and I had made mine. In the end, I had not just survived their betrayal, I had thrived. I had become stronger, more focused, more determined than ever. I was a phoenix, risen from the ashes of their treachery, my wings spread wide and ready to soar to even greater heights. As I drifted off to sleep, my mind was already racing with new ideas, new challenges to conquer. The future stretched out before me, bright with possibility, and I was ready to seize it with both hands. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your precious time. If you enjoyed this story, then please make sure you subscribe to this channel. That would help me a lot. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.